Hey, loves. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's always a pleasure, always. And I'm grateful for you being here, both with us live and on the replay. I'm Grace Redman, and thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Real Talk, where I get to have real life, raw conversations with incredible people from my circles and communities who've created amazing. Today, my guest truly is amazing. He has an incredible story. My guest today is Kelsey Hightower. Kelsey is a self taught, former distinguished principal engineer at Google Cloud, the co chair of KubeCon, the world's premier Kubernetes conference, and an open source enthusiast. As a curious and motivated self learner, Kelsey gained an interest in computing at a young age and started his IT career by opening a small consulting shop 20 years ago. From those beginnings, his career progressed quickly. Kelsey is a solver at heart with a passion for helping others. With many successful speaking and teaching engagements under his belt and a proven track record of getting things done, he hopes to solve many problems facing IT culture by equipping people with the mental and computational software they need to succeed in the competitive world of technology. Kelsey is one of the top keynote speakers in the tech space. He has been called one of the most respected in cloud in the world. He's an instrumental contributor to the open source community, and he believes in practicing gratitude and investing in others. Help me welcome Kelsey Hightower to the show today. Kelsey, welcome.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a gift to have you with us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. I mean, I was so excited to be here. I got dressed like
You
full
look
sweater.
great.
I even have pants on, jeans on. Usually it's cargo shorts because the camera's not getting below the waist. I was like, today I'm putting on jeans. So
Thank you, Kelsey. I appreciate you look great and I appreciate it. You always look great. I've watched your videos and we've connected before, so it's an honor to have you. I know, and congratulations. I know you recently retired. So
yep, retired.
congratulations.
What I'm learning though is retirement really is getting time to do all the things you wish you could do, but you were too busy to do them. And I'm realizing that you just kind of end up working for yourself, but you do get to choose what you work on and who you do it with. So happy retirement indeed.
Yes, that's beautiful. And I know when you did make your retirement announcement on Twitter, you said, I've spent the last 25 years working and now I want to spend the next 25 years living. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, when I think about my whole career, 25 years in this tech game, I'm 42 years old, and I can just remember every stage of the way. You spent countless hours, nights, weekends just trying to get enough skill to get you to the next level. Whether that was a promotion at one job or betting on a future skill set that can get you hired at a different job.
Mm,
So much goes into that that before you know it, 25 years just flies by. And so to me, I kind of felt like I spent an enormous amount of my time, and I think it paid off learning
abs-
how to work and be good at my job. And I used to have this question I would ask myself, probably starting maybe 5, maybe even 10 years ago. And I would ask myself, what if I put this much into living? Like,
mm,
what is it like? Because when you go to work, you have to get into the right mindset, you get submerged into your work, and then there's this feedback loop where you understand if you're doing good or not. But when it comes to family, not that I would like all of that structure for dealing with my friends and family, but how do you improve at life? And I would ask my colleagues this question too. It's like, hey, what if you got all your time back? What would you do?
mm.
And the smartest people in the world that I was surrounded by don't really have a great answer for this. And the reason why I think most people don't have a great answer for if you were lucky enough to get all your time back is that we never thought about it.
No.
Right? At work, we have structure, we have goals, we have deadlines, we have all of these things that kind of keep us pushing forward. But life, it kind of feels like we just kind of wing it, void of strategy, and whatever happens, happens, and we respond to that. So I want to do a better job going forward.
That was beautiful, Kelsey. And you're right. I do the same thing. I've done the same thing. I have put a lot of my effort, say in the last 25 years, into work. And now I'm at a point in my life where focusing, okay, how do you live? How do we move forward? For me, I believe it was because we got rewarded for working. You didn't get rewarded for the family or the relationships. And then the family and the relationships suffer because we're focusing on the work. Do you think, while for those of us that are, still working in our careers, is there a way that we can invest in both?
Life teaches you about the work because if you pay attention to just little things in society, like how things work, for example, if you turn on the faucet in your house, you could ask yourself a question: how does water flow all the way to this faucet? And you can go explore how that works. As someone with an engineering background like myself, you may actually find a real world solution that also applies to the thing that you're working on at work.
Mm,
Because it turns out like some of this science is transferable from one space to another. And then that becomes a source of innovation.
mm,
Or when you take the time to really pay attention to a movie or a book and you find inspiration, that may be the idea that you use to motivate the team if you're in a leadership position. And then it gives you these analogies that help people really understand the concepts that you're trying to convey and build. So I think one thing that maybe I learned a little too late in life is that the best people at work tend to have the best life experiences.
mm,
When you think about people who work on music, it's the fact that they live, they've loved, they've lost, that when they write that song, it's way more believable than someone who's only had a great life. And so I think what you learn from the real world typically applies to work. And it should, because typically most of us, at the end of the day, we're probably building something for actual people who live in the real world. So there's a lot of value in submerging yourself on the other side of that equation. You can call it user research if you need a way to justify that expense. But I do think it's really important to make sure that the thing you're working on, you can connect it to the humans at the other end. And what best way to get that empathy than to submerge yourself in
mhm.
the people that you're ultimately going to eventually call your customers?
And you talk about not only in investing in ourselves, but investing in others. Is that a way that we can, for say, live and gain experience and grow through investing in others?
Well, so there's two sides of this. One could be the philosophical, easy thing to do: be nice to people because it's
Mhm,
just the right thing to do. But it turns out, at least from my experience, the best way to make money in the world is to be useful.
mm,
And the more people you're useful to, typically the better the results can be. And so, for some people, especially if you're just starting out, let's imagine that you're starting a creative industry or agency and you create logos for people. The hardest part of running that business is going to be getting the first customer. And so all the skills that you invest in, and you can imagine who your first customer is going to be. It's like the person running that local flower shop, all they got is this sign called flowers, right? Call this number and we got flowers. We do Valentine's Day, we do birthdays. That's all they got, no brand. And I've been on the receiving end of getting my very first logo for a small business that I had. And when a business owner sees the creativity that you put into bringing their vision to the world, and now this person has a logo, that now they have a brand which to anchor everything that they believe about their business, themselves, and the customers they serve. And so imagine that you go and you get that first customer. You may transform this company to now they're 1-800 Flowers. They went
mhm,
from a corner store to run of the mill, generic, buy flowers from anywhere, to this global brand, all because you were extremely helpful to them. And they will always remember that. And typically, when they're in their circles of other CEOs and people who run businesses, and they say, you know what, if you need help with your branding, I have a deep emotional connection to this person who just powered my business, helped take it to the next level. So to me, I find it as, even if you approach this from a selfish lens, I always found it better just to be kind and helpful to other people. And if you got an ego like I have, it's so much better when people tell you thank you because you've done something great to impact them. Um, I think there's a source of motivation in any of that. So that became my default way of living and working. It's just trying to be as useful to as many people around me as possible.
I love that. You talked about that value. What is the value we bring to the table? And I can relate to part of that. When I started my career 25 years ago, my in the staffing business, staffing is sales, and I got so caught up in the numbers, and it felt stressful. And they told me, stay on top of the competition, stay on top of the numbers, but it felt so disconnected. And the moment I stepped back and I said, I can't do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the relationship and building the relationship, being kind and giving as much as I can. And then that's when I started to enjoy what I'm doing. I don't believe I could still be here 25 years later if it wasn't for the service, because I've been through 5 economic crises. And I believe it's like you said, it's because of the value that I brought. And also, I believe people buy on emotion. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge for all of us, the right person at the wrong job yields the wrong results.
That's true.
And I think a lot of us, we just want to make it far enough to find that right match where they will allow us to do the right thing, the thing we enjoy doing the most, that we can do the most authentically, that has what you just described baked into it. Because
Mhm.
sometimes you go and get your first like sales job, all they want to see is numbers go up and to the right. They don't care
Right.
how many people you got to call, how annoying you have to be. They just need the numbers to go up and to the right. But the same person, if you give them an environment where they say, listen, we don't expect people to sell anything for the first 6 months. What we want you to do is learn the business, learn the product, and learn how to talk about it from a place of honesty and integrity. And if you get a sell along the way, bonus points. And imagine that world where you're selling cars and people walk in and you're just patient, you're not rushing them. You're saying, you know what? This isn't the car from you. If you buy this car from us, you're going to be miserable. This
Mhm.
isn't what you want. But then it allows you to be very authentic and honest to the people who really it is a good fit for. Whenever that two things happen, you tend to see people operate at the height of their capabilities.
Mm.
It's just that that's not always the situation or scenario. And it could just come down to timing, where the
True.
company doesn't have the patience for people to blossom into the best versions of themselves. And then pressure takes over. And then we get less than in terms of results. So I think if you're ever in that scenario, yes, whenever you can do that. And I guarantee you, someone watching this right now has ran into someone who's like, wow, this person loves their job. Like, I've been in Best Buy 50 times and never has someone been this happy to be here. Me and my wife were in Best Buy just looking at like new TVs. We bought a new house. And this one guy was like, hey, you want to come in and listen to these speakers? Now, we had no interest and listen to the speakers, but when you see someone in a sound room with their eyes closed, looking like they're
Well,
just in a world of their own, I'm like, there must be something really interesting in here. So we go in, and he's already sitting in the best spot in the sound room, and he gets up and says, hey, you gotta sit right here. And so me and my wife, we sit down in these chairs, and they're perfectly balanced to the audio in the room.
mm,
He says, let me play something for you. And he played this artist we haven't heard of, but it was this perfect blend of all the music we like and all the music we never knew we should like. And he played this song and he was just quiet. And he
mm.
had this look on his face like, oh, this is about to be good.
I love it.
He mentioned the artist and like, we don't know who that is. And he was just like, oh my God, I get to be the first one to introduce you to this and you'll never forget it. And we were in there for about 15 good minutes. We heard probably 4 or 5 songs.
Nice.
And he didn't try to sell us the stuff once. He just gave us the best experience that he knew how. And I was like, babe, you can tell he loves this job.
Mm. The enthusiasm is contagious.
Yeah, I got out of a cab one time and I remember the person saying I was going to the airport, flying to do some work. And he said, your attitude determines your altitude. I'm not
Oh,
sure why he said this, but it
mm,
makes a lot of sense that you can take any task. Like your mom says, go wash the dishes. And if you give an attitude, number one, she's not going to even be happy with you if you go do the dishes. But if you approach that with a great attitude, like, mom, I can't wait to wash the dishes because, you did cook for me. That's the least I could do.
mhm.
What the heck? Is
Right?
this my son?
So speaking of, who would you say has motivated you the most during your lifetime?
I used to always give the answer of the people I've never met, the people you see through the TV, the most famous person that you feel you have an emotional connection with. But then I realized, though, that it has always been people like my mom.
Mm,
Like, because when I rewind the timeline and you really examine the things that she had to go through just to make sure that I had the chance at success, can't guarantee anything.
no.
And when I rewind that clock, I realized that the work ethic that she put through to kind of get the next job, the next skill, when she said no, and you have to buy it yourself, so go get a job, all of these things that only a person who cares about you extremely deeply can give you this type of guidance and advice.
Mm,
And so I think a lot of times we look past these people because they're just there by default. And so you're just like, oh, you're my mom. You're supposed to do that stuff. I can't find inspiration in you. You're kind of like my enemy for a while. But when you really think about it, though, I found a lot of value in that now as a person who has a daughter who's 16 years old. There's a
mhm,
lot that goes into trying to shape another human to
mm,
have the best head start they can possibly have. So now I kind of remind myself that that's number one. That's the type of person that I look up to the most. But I do draw inspiration from even people who express themselves. Like you watch a really good movie and that movie tugs at all your emotions, and you're done watching that movie, like that was a good job. Who was that director?
mhm,
I can tell that they put their all into this. And you hear this with like musicians quite a bit. Like their first album is like this biography that they write for themselves. So I find inspiration across a wide range of people who have the courage to produce something that they know will be eventually judged, either it's good or it's
mm,
bad. And also, the last thing is trying to find inspiration from everyday people, just to kind of think long and hard, like that people that come and pick up your trash every
mhm.
week without fail. That's the only reason why everything gets to stay clean and you don't have to haul it yourself. And
That's
so I try
true.
to find inspiration in just those little things versus holding everyone to either you're amazing or you're
Mm,
invisible.
I love that. It reminds me of the book, The Go-Getter.
Hmm.
And he talks about we're all from, like you said, from the janitor to the CEO, we all have something valuable to contribute, knowledge, inspiration, and don't look past that. So that book was very powerful. That just reminded me of that. Something we talked about in the past was I know, you spent 8 years at Google, but you turned them down 3 times. Can we talk about that? Because most people would kill to work at Google, and here's Kelsey, he's like, "Yeah, no, no, and no."
Yeah, that was 8 years ago. So at that point, I'm already in the tech game 17 years in.
Mhm,
And by the time you're in the industry for 17 years, you hope there's a few things in place. One, a level of confidence that you do know what you're doing.
mhm.
And so I was at the level of confidence that there's no interview process that can validate my entire career. No way was I going to allow anyone's interview process to tell me whether I was fit or not.
Amen.
And then, second, was financial stability. I was in a position to say no.
Mhm.
And what I realized is most of my career wasn't composed of that option. Usually, you take the job that's in front of you right now. And whether it's the best job or not doesn't matter because you kind of need that job and you need it soon. And so, in this particular situation, I didn't need to optimize for money anymore. And so then I could say, and also I had a pretty good opportunity to say yes to instead of saying yes to that one. And so I had an offer from NASA. And throughout my career, I've kind of worked at financial institutions, people that run internet to your house, and then some of the smaller and larger tech companies who make the tools and services you use every day. But there was also a part of my career where I was like, I want to do something that is bigger than any of those things. And I used to do a little bit of work with the NASA team around their next generation of platforms to get people to Mars and eventually back. And I remember doing a site visit, and they had, the Mars rover, that thing with four wheels that's running around Mars, taking pictures and sending data back. Well,
Mhm.
when I was on site one time, they had one of those, the new one, just going in a circle, and they told me all about how it works and the laser that they put on top of it that can zap rocks so they can study what's inside of them. I was like, how cool is this?
A real robot.
A real robot, but also they're trying to work on like travel and space, all this sci-fi stuff
Mhm.
in real life. And so when I had an opportunity to go work there and help lead some of the efforts to make that happen, I'm all in. I was finally convinced that this is that happy medium between technology and real life. And so that's what my opportunity was. But eventually, that offer, when you say no, and I realized there's a big distinction between applying for a job and people looking to hire you.
Mm,
Those are two different things,
very true.
right? When I'm hiring, I just need the best candidate I can find. But to be honest, there's probably 10,000 out of a million that will do. When someone is hiring you specifically, all that goes out the window. The focus is on how to get you in the building, and we can
Yeah.
figure out the role later. And
Mhm.
so that was kind of the scenario that I was in. And so, of course, every no was countered with a, what if the numbers were bigger?
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, well, at some point, a lot of the emotion and logic goes out the window. And it's then replaced with, what could I do if I had those numbers? And I remember it got to a point where it would be irresponsible. I asked for a few things, namely, I need to work from home.
Mhm.
Under all scenarios and conditions, I am not moving, and I need to create the most comfortable work environment for myself. And if you
Amen.
can meet those along with those numbers, then we have a deal. And I went back to the NASA team and I said, listen, this changes a lot for me. It cuts retirement down by like 10 to 15 years. So I need to strongly go do this. And then NASA CTO was like, doesn't matter. You should. You can go do it for 2 years. You can always come back here
Mm.
because it will be decades before we're completing this mission of getting people to Mars and back again. And if you don't like it, the offer still stands. You can always come join the team. And that was enough for me to understand that I wasn't going to be burning the bridge
Mhm. You have
and it was
options.
worth to go experiment. And then I was there for 8 years. So turned out it was a good call.
Incredible call. And you're just so loved and so respected, and I can see why, because you take something, I'm like I said earlier, I'm tech challenged, but I've done a little bit of research, and you are an amazing storyteller where you turn things into these metaphors, beautiful metaphors, where it's easy to understand processes. And that's a gift in itself. So thank you for that. It's beautiful. 'Cause I'm understanding things so much better when it was harder for me to understand them in the past.
I think that's all of our jobs. If you gain any expertise in any field of life, the best thing you can do is translate it so the other person understands it too. Like that is the fundamental thing we can do with this thing we call language.
And you have a beautiful way of doing that. So I want to go back to open. Let's talk about open source community. The only reason I've heard about open source and Kubernetes is because my husband's in the tech world, and I've heard it over the years, and now I finally have a good understanding. But can you talk about the open source community and why that could be a great way for someone in tech to enter in the tech world,
So there's a couple things here, and I want to separate the two.
please?
The open source community produces software. And I think we're all familiar with software. If you play video games, that's software. If you do your taxes online in the browser, that's software. This thing we're using right now to do this podcast
Hmm.
is software. So we're all familiar with software. And the most traditional model, I guess, before the dawn of open source was that a company would start an enterprise, right? If a farmer wants to sell vegetables, they buy some land and they grow the vegetables, they harvest the vegetables, and they put a price on them and you buy them. But that farmer may come up with their own kind of secret sauce. Maybe they do a little bit of things to their pineapples and slap a logo on it. These are Dole pineapples. Only we can make these special set of things. And that's fine. And we all enjoy that stuff. But that would be a proprietary pineapple. The
Hmm.
price is so low that it's not really prohibitive. But what if Dole pineapples cost like $50,000 a pineapple?
I'm not eating pineapple.
Nobody eating pineapple. If you've ever eaten pineapple, we wouldn't believe you. Like, receipt or it didn't happen. And so imagine that, and you say, you know what? Pineapples taste so good. They have so many health benefits that pineapples should be accessible. And so what you do is you say, you know what? I'm Hawaii. This land is ours, and we're going to open this up to anyone that wants to learn how to farm and grow pineapples. So we're going to give you the land for free or subsidized costs. But here's the thing. As a collective community, you all need to come together and figure out how to grow pineapples. Now we have a blueprint, so they may write up the instructions. And in
Mhm.
the open source world, these would be like the white papers or the research papers. We have an idea on how to make better compression so that the video looks really, really nice on your screen, but it doesn't use too much of your internet capacity. And so that may just become a research paper. But then the people who look at that research paper, so number one, we democratize the how. And sometimes it just starts with information. Here's how one would do it.
Hmm.
We haven't done it, but here's how you would do it. And so in the open source community, what we do, and farming is a lot more intensive, labor intensive than writing software. So from your keyboard, you could decide that, you know what's missing? It's really expensive to do XYZ. We are going to come together. I know someone in Germany. I know another person in South Carolina. And we have a common interest that we want to be able to build a particular piece of software. And we may come together and decide, you know what? All three of us want to use it. And here's the thing, if we build it for ourselves, it's so easy to make it accessible for other people just to download it. And if they like it too, they can run it. And so these are the places where people with this set of skills come to collaborate. And for a lot of us, we are not interested in building a business around the software. So we decide to just make it free. And I think the closest analogy to this in the real world would be like YouTube. Some people just get their camera phone,
Hmm.
make a video, and just publish it on YouTube for the world to see. And you can download that video, or you can actually take some ideas from that video and make your own. And it's so cheap to do that now that tons of people do it. And so, in the world of open source, the reason why it's so important, we're not just a collection of hobbyists building little things to scratch our own itches. These things are actually the things that power the world now. So, a lot of the commercial software, what they looked around and said, wow, one company trying to solve all their problems is no match for 10 million people trying to solve all these problems. They end up building things better than we could, even though we put $10 million behind it. And so what they do is they tend to adopt these open source projects and maybe run it for you,
Hmm.
and they give it a name and they all call it the cloud, right? Use this software and we run it for you. You log in, you pay a small fee, and we'll host that software for you. And so that world of collaboration where we can have new ideas get democratized and then we can turn those ideas into things that people can touch has been a really great phenomenon that we found in the world of open source.
Now, so for example, you go into that community and you create this amazing piece of software and people start to use it. Can a company come to you and say, this is an amazing piece, and then give you opportunity? Or do they just continue to use it for free?
This is the sticky point because depending on what your philosophy is, those companies should pay.
Right.
But there's some people like me that have a philosophy, I don't care.
Hmm.
I wrote this software for a purpose, and I have a license that says you can use it for whatever you want. If you want to take my software and you build $1 billion business on top, I literally don't care.
Hmm.
Now, there's a risk to that for that company because what if I stop working on it? What if I make it do something different that you don't want your business to do? Now we have,
Because you own it, not the
well,
company.
I just have the most expertise.
Hmm.
It's my software. And one thing that's very common is when there's disputes in the open source community, we fork it, meaning I take a copy of the software, I rename it, and maybe I make it do stuff that you don't think it should be doing. And so now we get a split in the road. And if you think about it, human language is this way, right? Like I was very surprised to learn that English is a Germanic language. It's from Germany. And it's evolved over the years as it's passed through civilization over time, and people add words to it. And so maybe we say, look, all the words in the dictionary, I don't care about those limitations. I'll just make my own word. And then the dialect just splinters and then it becomes something different. And
Hmm.
so humans always need this release valve. So in the open source community, we have that. So now you can have a license that's a bit more restrictive. You can have a license that says you can use this software, but not for commercial purposes. And then that software typically is protected by um, intellectual property rights, sometimes copyright. And so if you have the manpower, you can do the legal stuff and say, hey, I just caught Samsung using my software for commercial endeavor and I didn't improve. And then you can take them to court and say, my license doesn't allow you to do that. And you can imagine some other philosophies where a lot of people in the open source community may say things like, I don't want any military using my software to build weapons. So maybe you add a restriction to your license to police that. What you typically see, though, is a company will come along and say, we don't have that capability. And what we'll do is we'll have some of our people work on it. So we like the software, but it's not perfect. It has bugs and a few glitches. We'll contribute fixes to those things, and you can merge them back, and everyone else can use the changes. That is like the true essence of open source and spirit.
So
That everyone
collaboration.
collaboration, you try to do your part, you try to step up and fill in the gaps. It could be writing documentation, hiring people to work on it full time for a temporary basis to add a feature that you need. It's just really, to me, but besides the idea that it's like this cool technology thing, actually gives like humanity hope that we can actually find common things we agree on.
Mm,
Most of us have never met each other except for online,
that's cool.
right? And then we just come together and we build this software that is so good that they end up becoming industry standards that even the biggest companies in the world also adopt and start contributing to as well.
That's amazing. And I know when we spoke about that, also talked about education and you being self-taught and excelling in the industry where most, the young generation feels I will not be able to excel in tech or any industry unless I'm college educated. And of course, college is a great thing. But I know we talked about where you said there's a different way to go about things. It doesn't have to be just that one way of college. There's a new kind of educational paradigm happening. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's the thing that's so interesting about the times we live in right now. I could imagine going back X number of years where the majority of the population can't read or write. And so education was only bound up either through word of mouth or the people who could read and write. And so education is not super accessible. Only those that can control the narrative control what you learn.
That's true.
And so then at that point, you ask yourself as an individual, what is learning? And what are your sources to learn from? Now, zoom forward to where we are in present day. And I ask you, what do you want to learn? And you say, I want to learn how to make an omelet. And I could say, well, you could go to college for culinary arts. And not only are you gonna learn how to make omelets, you're gonna learn how to do all kind of things. Like, yo, time out. I just want to make an omelet. Like, I don't necessarily want to be a chef. And you say, okay, I'm just gonna go watch a YouTube video. And even though people don't think of themselves as educators, the people who make those tutorials are educators. Like,
Oh
they're
yeah.
teachers. And it's like, this is how you make an omelet. Correct eggs, you do blah blah blah. And it's like, I now know how to make an omelet. Now, you may go around and teach someone else how to make an omelet. And then that is one way for education to continue. And so this is why a lot of people think of that form of education as continuing education,
Hmm.
right? Learning these new skills. But there's also this kind of old world view of education that it needs to be bound up behind a gatekeeper. This education isn't valid unless I certify that
Hmm.
you've learned what I taught. And that's going to cost you about, I don't know, $15,000 a year on average for in state and maybe 35 to 40,000 for out of state.
Oh, we're talking about 80 plus thousand these days.
Yeah, and it can get high. And so I think what
Yes.
happens is, and I feel so sad about this because I think we're pressuring kids into believing that that's the only form of education, that they
Yes.
have to go and get indebted. They have all this peer pressure from society, no
Mhm.
college, no good job. And the truth is, it ain't true.
That's not true.
It's
So
not
thank you
true
so much.
anymore. And
Mhm.
so I think now the real question is education, and not to put down the colleges,
No.
not to put down the people who make YouTube videos, but as an individual, you have to think about your relationship between you and education. And no matter what, if you learn computer science in 1989, and that's where your knowledge stops from 89, you would be almost useless today in 2023 because your college degree won't help you. So
That's
from 89 to 2023, you better have been learning all of the new things that's going to make you helpful to other people. And so that's what I think about education. So when we say self taught, I think what we're really saying is that we are willing to continue learning pretty much forever.
Mhm.
And we have the confidence that says, even if I don't have a college degree to hang on the wall, I still possess the knowledge and skills in order to provide value. And I think the industry, especially in the tech industry, It's almost like athletics. There are most people that go to college for athletic scholarships. A lot of them don't graduate that go on to play professionally because in professional sports, they care more about your skills for the job you're being hired to do than what university and college degree you have. I'm not saying that college degree isn't valuable,
Mhm.
but these days, industry and craft have kind of superseded just a piece of paper. And so I think for you now, at least my philosophy has been if college is the way you want to start, great. I guarantee you it will not be the last bit of learning that you will ever have. So bring it all into the equation. And so that means all forms of learning, whether you go buy a book and take an IT certification for $35 or you
Mhm.
go to the best computer science school in the world, either way, you're on your educational path.
I love that, and I love the analogy you gave. Like, if you received your, degree in 1989, we're in 2023. Don't tell me that you haven't been learning along the way, because if you haven't, then what are you doing? I think we have to grow, instead of if we don't grow, we die. And I don't mean physically die, but literally.
No, it's so important, but when you think about the opportunity cost, just to get real for a second, and I get it, I've been there. You're super tired, and all you want to do is you want to come home and maybe tune out to Netflix for like 4 hours, if we're being honest. And you think about what you get from that. Now, you get some entertainment, you get to kill a bit of time, but also that's an opportunity to go learn something. And a big part of my career, I've noticed like, man, if I take that time and I'm going to invest in a skill, for example, in retirement, I don't think about software as much anymore, but I do think about being able to do things around the house.
Mhm.
And so I was like, you know what? Could I remodel my own fireplace and change it into the TV center that I wanted? And there was a lot of new skills I had to learn, like the electricity and how to run it, how to rewire everything, how to hang up shiplap the right way, redo the framing, how to cut lumber, drywall, the whole nine. And I was really patient. A lot of people were like, it would have been cheaper or faster for you to pay someone to do it. But it's like, but then I wouldn't have the skill.
Mhm.
And now that I have this skill, when I look around the house, my confidence level of like what I could do has gone up dramatically that I've taken on other projects around the
Mhm.
house. And maybe now, maybe that's something that I start adding to my tool bag. But now I'm the type of person who values skill as a form of wealth.
Mm.
And so I think now when you're spending time, you're asking yourself, is there any wealth I could be building? And I get it. A lot of people want to say, as soon as I get the skill, then I want to get the job to prove that it was worth it. But these are investments. When
Mm.
you go acquire any set of skills, whether it's exercising, having a good diet, maybe cooking for yourself, all of these things are investments in the future. And yeah, maybe one day they pay off into a better job, or they may pay off into the fact that you don't have to pay someone else to do a thing that you already know how to do.
So do you believe those investments in ourself compound?
I mean, drastically, because I've learned that one skill tends to lead to another
Mm.
skill. Like when people think about learning how to cook, there's a bit of chemistry involved. You may not know the details. There's a process involved. There's instructions and timing. And then you also learn how to create recipes yourself. You try new things and experiment. So let's say you spent from the age 14 to 18 cooking these wonderful dishes. You watch TV, you see a dish, you go make it yourself. And then one day you say, I want to be a software engineer. You will find that there's probably 80% of those skills transfer. Because in software engineering, the keyboard, that's our stove.
Mm.
Salt and pepper becomes the programming language we use. And then how we combine them is the cake. But if you've gone through that muscle memory of like following instructions, tuning things for your situation, when you cook, you troubleshoot like, whoa, this thing said 450 degrees, but not for my oven. My oven, you got to put it at 425 or it's going to burn. That's troubleshooting.
Mhm.
And when people realize those things, that collection of skills, the cook that understands the details that go into cooking has the perfect foundation for creating pretty much anything else because they have that systematic knowledge that I think carries over from industry to industry.
To learn. So do you believe that our failure can help us gain confidence?
I forgot who said it, but there's a quote that when you watch someone fail or fall, To laugh at them is to miss the opportunity to learn from them.
Mhm.
And so failure, I think, only happens when you give up, right?
I
Because failure
agree.
is not like a definite thing.
I
Failure
agree.
is like usually on a as a checkpoint, like there's 4 quarters in a game and you're losing. Now you could have said, hey, we failed the first quarter, like we are literally behind. But it doesn't mean you lost the game. And so to me, I think failure is just part of the process. Like
Mhm.
I don't know how you do anything without the potential to fail. So we know that there's always going to be a possibility. Things happen outside of what we want to happen. But that to me is temporary. So is winning.
I
Winning is temporary,
ooh,
right? There are people who have millions of dollars right now, but they're one health situation from zero. And so I think you have to understand that failure and success is just temporary. It's only right now. You are the 2021 world champions, not the 22 or 23 world
mhm.
champions. And so I
That's
think if you take that approach to it, then you stay humble and you stay consistent when you win and when you lose.
I love that. And what does consistent look like? What does that feel like when we're consistent? Okay, we win, we lose, but we're consistent. What does that look like?
I'm going to This is where I think the philosophy starts to be more important than the outcomes. And this is the hardest thing that I think there is to do. And so I'm going to try to figure out the moment where I understood that philosophy is important.
Mm,
Maybe I'm like 8 or 9, and I grew up in Long Beach, California, and my stepdad is Nigerian. And around that time, Hakeem Olajuwon, the center for the Houston Rockets, he was like the god of the NBA. What LeBron James is to the NBA, I can fair to say that there was 2 years in the NBA where Hakeem Olajuwon, this undersized center, was like the face of the NBA for a lot of people. Now Jordan was retired for 2 years, but who cares about that asterisk? And they win 2 championships. And the one thing he used to have us do is we used to have to record the games on VHS tapes. So if he's at work, he wants to come home and watch the game. So we put in the VHS tape.
don't
Now as a
tell him
kid,
who won.
yeah, you can't. Oh, you better not say who won. He's watching the game from start, and he don't need no commentary.
Right.
But the thing is, when we watch the game, especially when we're watching the game as a family together, I finally understood what hope feels like.
Mm,
When your team is playing, especially a team that you may not win, those finals, NBA playoffs, it could go either way. And so you're watching this game like, I hope we win. I hope that shot goes in. I hope the other player misses the flight and doesn't make it to the game. Like you have all of this hope, and then you get these outcomes. And every game, these are 7 game series. Who cares if you lose the first one? And so this hope makes the game way more interesting to watch. If you
mm,
ever had to watch games where you don't care about both teams, it's like I'd rather be doing anything else. But when it's a team you're invested in, you have all this hope. And this hope, maybe not having the outcome on the game. Now, to your question, when you have the same type of view on your own life, to win or lose doesn't make you give up on a team. Just because they didn't win the championship this year doesn't mean you don't cheer for them next year. You want to be a consistent fan.
mm,
And so you care about the players, the effort that they put in. When you really get mature, you can appreciate a good game. We lost by 1 point. It was a hell of a game. When you're not that level, you can't watch your team lose. You can't reconcile that
mm.
loss was even a possibility, even though you know it's part of the game. And so when it comes to like my own life, when I think about consistency, what I had to learn in tech was most of this doesn't matter. It, as small as these decisions are, I remember watching one of those programs about the universe, Neil deGrasse, and he was like, the earth is like this little
That's,
speck of sand
that's
in
true.
the universe. And I'm like, so we're kind of insignificant. Now, you could hear something like that and get into mass depression and feel like life is hopeless and it's not worth doing anything. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying is relax,
Yes.
put in the effort. And if it doesn't work out, I promise you the universe will continue to do its thing. And I think most people actually perform better when they know it's not going to be the end of the world every time
Mhm.
they go out and try something. That's what I mean by consistency. If you
Mhm.
say that you're a software developer and you've never written code before, but you know you got to work towards it, consistency means you got to keep that mindset. Keep learning. You're going
Mhm.
to make mistakes. You're going to find someone who's better than you.
For sure.
You're
And
going
you
to
want.
find, yeah, you're going to find someone who says you're not good.
Mhm.
Either way, though, the consistency is like, am I getting better over time at what I wish I was doing? If the answer is yes, then I think you can deal with those other outcomes.
So it's just surrendering and trusting the process and learning. And the consistency is being, neutral and taking the lessons and, like you said, gathering the information and exploring, just building your skill set to see what the next step is, or just be open to the next step.
There's two things for certain. You're born, you're going to die.
That's it, my brother.
And everything in the
And
middle.
I love the the special effects. Bam.
You know what? I didn't do that on purpose. My
That
software
was
is
sick.
literally doing it, but it's pretty cool.
That was sick. I must say. That
So
was
I
sick.
would say this, the stuff that happens in between, I think that's the stuff where you say, I got this undefined amount of time. And some people just get to a philosophy that you should just try to make every moment count. You can't
Amen.
always do that because we need breaks and rest. But I
Right.
do think it's important just to understand that you only have so many moments, not time. You don't have guaranteed 80 years. You get these moments, and those moments are like, I'm going to go visit my parents for the holidays. So that may be one of 15 times that you'll see them before the end. And so now you ask yourself, what do you do? And so I think the best advice to me is like, just be present sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes you don't really worry about the future or the past. You just like, in this moment, am I giving it my all? And that's one thing I think I learned from athletics is that all the practice, all the training, who won last year, who's supposed to win this year, doesn't matter right now. We got to focus on the game that's in front of us. And I think
Yes.
that's where that consistency comes from. That's the demonstration of the philosophy.
It's like just palms down, just keep moving forward and focus on where we are right now, not future tripping and not staying stuck to the past. Speaking of future tripping, do you believe that we can will our future? Like, do you believe that we will what we want in the future?
The reason why I'm going to say yes is because I've had too many examples of it coming true. I think you can call it other stuff. You can call it luck. You can call it chance. It can just be random. But I think there is a set of decisions that you have some control over. And I remember, in your intro, you said Kelsey's a keynote speaker. And someone says, well, how do you become a keynote speaker? And so I remember when I first spoke at conferences and local, what we call meetups, you would just sign up, give a 10, 15-minute presentation, and then you're off the stage. And then you get to go watch the keynote speaker. These are probably people that are getting paid. Keynotes are really interesting because if you go to a large conference, there may be like 5 different tracks on different topics. And so the audience is split, but not for the keynote speaker.
Not
The
the
keynote
keynote.
speaker
The
competes
keynote is the
no one, everyone. That's the only talk running at a time. And so one day I said, you know what? I'm only doing keynotes from here on out. I went on Twitter and said, I'm never, ever doing any more side sessions. And at that point in time, you communicate to the world what you believe needs to happen. So I have control over communicating to the world. I
Mhm.
also have control on getting skills that
Mm,
justify me being on the keynote stage. So those are the two things I have control over, and I got to do those two.
yes.
But imagine someone that runs conferences or has booked me for a conference before, and they see Kelsey says he's only doing keynotes. I was just about to send him an email for a side session, but I got to delete that email, and now I have to ask a different question. And one of my favorite hip hop artists, he had this line where he says, if I say I'm the best, I force you to think it.
Who's the who? Which
That was
artist is?
from Nas.
Mm,
He was like, if I say I'm the greatest, whether you believe it or not, you have to at least consider it. Now you could say, nah, you're kind of number 5, not number 1.
in whose perspective?
Exactly. But now you have to think it. And so me tweeting that I am now only doing keynotes, someone said, you know what? He will be a great keynote. And then you could call it luck. You can call it chance. You get these emails, and it could be months later where someone says, I found a keynote for you. And now you have to go execute. So yes, you kind of willed a little bit of the future in the scenario, but now you got to go on stage and
Mm,
let people know what you're capable of, because guess what? The next keynote typically comes from people saying the last keynote. And
mm-hmm.
but these are the things that you're in control of. So it's not that I can control the future, but there's a great saying that it's easy to predict the future when you're working on it.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're trying to do, not sit around and let things just happen to you and you complain or celebrate, but
Yes.
you really say, you know what parts do I control?
Mm-hmm.
And at least let me do that part. And then the things I don't control, then look, it is what it is. But I never want to say, well, man, I can't get a job. It's like, do you even have a resume? No, I
Mm,
haven't got around to that part yet. It's like, well,
right.
it's gonna be hard to get a
Right.
job. You got no resume.
Totally. We definitely have control, and I believe, like you said, put it out there. Like you said, luck. I personally, I've in a controversy about luck. For me, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I believe in luck. It's preparation and putting it out there. But like you said, it could be, all these different things. But when we're putting it out there and taking the action, we step into our future self. But it's scary. It's not an easy thing.
But to me, that's what makes life worth living.
Mm,
A lot of people think life is about things not going wrong, or
yeah.
everything being easy. But here's the thing: is the stories we appreciate the most, they come from people who have gone through things and said that there's a brighter side of this. And
Hmm.
so to me, when I look at life, it's like that's the interesting piece. Like no one watches TV of other people watching TV. It would
Right.
be
It's
silly.
boring.
You're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. You
Right.
want to see people go through things. And ideally, if you're paying attention, you know that you're going to go through things. So
Mhm.
I just think that's just what makes life worth living, that it isn't predictable, but you
Yes.
can definitely influence it.
Yes, and I love that, and lately, I've so many of my clients, communicating to me, "You know what? It seems like you're playing life like a game," and I am. I'm playing life like a game at this point because it makes it more fun for me, and it's unpredictable, and I'm just being fearless, like you said, I'm putting these things out there, and the universe is listening.
You know what's dope about people who think about life as a game? It's not the fact that it's a game. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. It's the fact that you've taken the time to create a framework for yourself.
Mhm.
Because whenever you think about any game, checkers, chess, it doesn't matter. Those games have rules.
Mhm.
And some people don't know all the right rules, but it's just enough for you to kind of play the game and learn how to improve at it. So when people say you treat life like a game, that means you're saying, I'm trying to pay attention to the board. I'm trying to
Yes.
understand how the pieces move. I
Mhm.
get that I'm not the best player yet, but I now have at least a foundation and framework wishing to track my progress, and
Yeah.
I'm going to keep playing. I don't care if I'm not the world's greatest chess player. I just like to play.
You know what, Kelsey? I show up every day and I know I'm not the greatest player, but one thing that you can count on, I'm definitely consistent and I'll show up. Even if I suck, I'll still show up.
And it's fun. This is what I think is so powerful about things like intramural sports. It's like we're not competing for the championship. We're just
Right.
here to test our abilities and
Totally.
have a bit of fun. Like that's dope too.
Totally. I'm competing against myself. I run my own race and um but you're amazing. So something fun I want to talk about. You managed a comedy show.
I manage a comedian,
Let's talk
and
about that. That was fun because you guys went all the way and won, a big, he won a big prize and let's talk
yeah,
about
the
that.
interesting thing about that. So when I got out of high school, 18, all the jobs to that point were McDonald's, Subway, Pizza Hut.
I worked at Burger King.
There you go. You know what it is. You know how it is to smell like the stuff you're cooking, and it
I
never comes
do.
out.
God.
And so in that world, I was actually afraid to actually apply for any of these corporate jobs. So I opened a computer store. And that computer store at the age of maybe 19, 20, you become this kind of community place where people come to buy a $10 keyboard or get a virus removed from the computer. But a lot of people that I went to high school with and their parents like, wow, this guy has a computer store, so let's just go there instead of going to places like Best Buy or something like that. And I remember one of my friends from high school, Ronnie Jordan. He's like, hey, I'm a comedian and I need a manager, and you seem to know business. I'm like, I don't see how the computer store and the comedy business are related at all.
Well, he had a good intuition.
Yeah, he came by and I said, "All right, I know Ronnie, but I don't remember you being funny in high school though. So, uh, I don't, I don't understand this comedy thing." And so I was like, "Listen, I do know how management works structurally, right? Managers help assist artists in certain ways, and then they get a piece, 10, 15%, sometimes high as 30%. So, how much do you make doing comedy at this time?" So, we're talking 2001, 2000. And he was like, "Well, right now, it's like $35."
He had a vision.
I was like, 35? Like, you go to the comedy club, they give you $35 and you go up, that's what you make? It's like, yeah, like before you're big, this is what you do. Sometimes you don't get paid at all. So I'm like, okay, what's 10% of $35? Like $3.50. Like, man, that's we can't drive.
You can't buy ice cream for $3.50.
We can't drive there for $3.50. So I don't know how this works. So I said, all right, how about this? I got some ideas, but first I just want to see if you funny. And the scenario was weird because, he walks into this computer store and we're sitting down and we're talking about this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I want to see if you're funny. He's like, well, I got a show tonight. I need a ride. I was like, no worries. And so we drive. There's two comedy clubs, big comedy clubs in Atlanta at that time. Uptown Comedy Corner. This is kind of like, have you ever seen the Apollo Theater? You get like 7 seconds to demonstrate you're funny or you're booed off the stage. There is no love. I don't care if you're 7 years old. You better be funny or you out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another club north side of town that's like 30 minutes away called, I think it was called Jillian's in like Alpharetta, Georgia or something like this. And it's a different audience. This is more like the Comedy Central vibe. They'll give you a chance. You can probably go for an hour as long as you have the courage to get up there. They'll be with you. So we go to Uptown Comedy Corner. I'm like, yo, man, this place is brutal. First of all, are we safe? So we go in there, and I'm like, man, I don't know if he's gonna make it. And he actually did well. That people were laughing hysterically. I'm laughing. I'm like, wow, you're funny. But I don't know if you can do this comedy set up north because we went in the same day. We drove after that to the other one, and he switched it up, and he identified with the audience.
Nice.
And it worked. So we got $70. And I'm like, okay, here's the thing. I'm going to run my computer business. I make way more doing that than I can ever make as a percentage of what you do for now. But here's the strategy. Right now, comedians are making videos and comedy tapes, and they sell those and T-shirts. So if we augment these shows with that stuff, then I think you can actually make meaningful cash. And I got CD burners. I had a friend named Trellis that was doing video stuff. We'll just kind of push together the merchandise, and we'll just do our splits from there, and I'll just help you out. And the nice thing about that, though, is that he got local. In Atlanta, if you get good local, you start to raise awareness with like some of the other celebrities, comedy club owners, and they start asking you to come do shows with them.
Nice.
And so the nice thing is we would find ourselves in like Alabama and Birmingham because a guy named Ricky Smiley was there, and he was like, come do shows here. And so we got lucky. There was this contest, Walter Latham, he did Kings of Comedy, Queens of Comedy. He just hit this huge deal with Paramount, like hundreds of millions of dollars to do movies because the movie did so well in theaters. And so he's like, you know what? We're kind of at the tail end of the big hype around reality TV shows. But he wanted a reality show that was going to look for the next king of comedy. 16 cities. And basically the way it worked was American Idol style. But you can imagine there being professional comedians that would go first, like the big names.
Mm-hmm.
They would be there first, and then the comedians would go in between, and the audience would judge who did the best, and they would eliminate a few, and they would move on. And so I did the math. I said, listen, let's say they're paying about $500 a show. All you got to do is not get eliminated for like 4 shows, and that's $2,000. That's it. Winning this whole thing, I don't know. But not getting eliminated in Los Angeles and this other city, I think you could do that. And so that was the plan. And so every day we would talk on the phone, and you have to wear suits. Walter Latham, you can't wear jeans and T-shirts. You have to have suits. and he's a big guy. Ronnie's like 6'1",
So
pretty
they
big
had to wear
guy.
a suit to perform?
You gotta wear a suit. You have to look like Steve Harvey and the rest of them. You
Oh,
have to
man.
wear
I love
suits.
Steve Harvey.
And so we went to Men's Warehouse. I was like, listen, I got $300 for your suits. I
Uh-huh.
need my $300 back though.
So you gotta win.
So you got to at least win 2 or 3 cities so we can cover the suit money and some money for your pocket. And the grand prize was like 35,000. And the last show was in New York,
Mm,
Madison Square Garden.
nice.
And I was like, you know what? We probably won't get there, but who cares? We're just building up your career. And this reality TV show never got published, but they had film crews on the road. So you were on a TV show no matter what, good for business. So he does his first show, and we're talking like, hey, you get 2 minutes, then 3 minutes, then 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, or something to that scenario. But it just kept incrementing per city as people got eliminated. He's like, what do we do in our first minute? I was 2 minutes. I was like, dude, you already know. He has this one joke. It's still on YouTube right now. You can find it. But he has this joke where he's like making love to this honey bun, or he's in love with this honey bun. He's trying to lose weight, and a spotlight shows up, and there's a honey bun. And these songs play, like Alicia Keys, I Keep on Falling in Love with You.
I gotta find it and
And
watch
it's
it.
hilarious. And like, it's a bit that's like, it kills. And so I was like, just do the honey bun joke out the gate. Don't waste no time. We're going to build up to it. And you can't lose with the honey bun joke. So he would call and say, Kelsey, I said, did you get eliminated? No. Great. Off to the next city. And so as we made progress, I realized that based on who's left, you actually might have a chance. Now, here's the thing though, you go to these different cities, and some of the comedians are from specific cities. And there's one comedian, he just wore the wrong suit.
Oh.
It was like a leprechaun green or something. And the way the contest works is if you make noise, whether it's booing or applauding, it counts as for you. And so this dude didn't perform the best, but his suit was so bad they started to boo, which made him win.
Oh,
And it was like one less great competitor for Ronnie to deal with.
good strategy.
Long story short, we make it to New York, and one of my friends works at Delta, and I was like, "Can I get a buddy pass to go to New York?" He was like, "What are you going to New York for?" I said, "You know, Ronnie is like a finalist, and we have a chance to win the big thing." And he's like, "Where's it at?" I was like, "Madison Square Garden. Like they've been doing
That's
arenas this whole
big.
time. Yeah, these are arenas." And so I was like, "Listen, you can go, but don't be no groupie." Like he's 12 years older than me at that time. And his name is Herb. I said, Herb, you can't go up there being no groupie though. He's like, what are you talking about? I taught you everything you know. So I'm just saying there's gonna be a lot of celebrities. I just don't want to have no foolishness. We're there to watch Ronnie and then go back home. So we get there, and I remember going to this massive arena. We had floor seats,
Mm,
and in front of me, you had people like Little Kim, all these hip hop
mhm.
superstars. These are famous people.
Yeah,
Chris
super
Rock
fun.
was there,
Oh,
and
nice.
and so my comedian comes out, and I'm doing the math. It's like, man, we put together the perfect set. We have his 3, 4 best jokes in the row, and we end with the honey bun. And I said, this is New York. They love performance. More than any other city, they love performance. And he killed, and he won 35,000, and they brought out
Nice.
this huge check. And from then on, we did a lot of the college circuit. He still performs comedy to this
Yeah,
day.
I love that story.
Yep, and that was it. It was just me basically taking skills from one industry and rubbing it on another. But the big takeaway I also learned was how to perform.
Mhm.
When you're doing these keynotes in the tech community, one part is like being there to educate, but I also know you're still there to entertain. And there has to be a bit of storytelling and something that makes it engaging, even for the people who don't care about the technology as much.
That yes, you've been so engaging, and I loved everything we were talking about and the metaphors that I've already taken up so much of your time. I looked at the time like, "Oh my gosh, Kelsey, it's been an hour already." But I mean, we covered so much, and you're so amazing and just have so much wisdom, and it was fun. What's one last piece of wisdom that you can leave our audience with?
I mean, I think the moral of the story for me in retirement now is just be present.
Mm.
The past is going to be what it's going to be. You can definitely influence the future, but don't forget to be present.
Yes, be present and enjoy what's in front of us for sure. I appreciate you. That was so fun to have you on. I mean, so many nuggets of wisdom. I love your storytelling. And for everyone that's watching, thank you so much for joining us today. And you're on the replay. Thank you for the replay. And Kelsey, if anyone wants to reach out or they want to get into tech, and I know you talked about meetups and the open source community, is there a way that our audience can get in touch with you?
Yeah, my email address is on my Twitter profile. So my email address is kelsey.hightower@gmail. Just send me an email. It's my preferred mode of communication these days. And I'm
Awesome.
spending a little bit of time on social media. So I'm at Kelsey Hightower on Twitter.
Awesome. And then I will include your information on this chat. And then once we upload the podcast, stay with me, Kelsey. Thank you all for watching us. I appreciate you because I know there are so many other places you could be. And please like and share this episode so we can still keep inviting incredible people like Kelsey to the show. Wishing you all an amazing day ahead. Take care.